Thanks, Theo.
Okay, thank you. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. And yeah, let's get started. I'm gonna be your host today and welcome everybody to the contributors meeting. Starting off with triage and discussion. Last week we had Reggie and Kanika doing triage. Any updates to report today? Anyone?
Nothing in particular from my side.
Nothing
Okay,
from me.
Okay, thank you. All right. And we need to select who's going to be doing triage next week. Any volunteers in the call?
I can go for primary.
Thank you, Nitish. Any volunteers? Prepare with Nitish.
I can do as well before KubeCon.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Nitish. All right. And let's jump into the discussion topics for today. First one, we have Eugene. And am I pronouncing your name correctly? I'm not sure if it's Eugene or Eugene.
It's Eugene in English, it's Evgeny in Russian, Evgen in Ukrainian.
Okay.
How do you want?
Okay, cool. So I'm going to be pronouncing Eugene. I think it makes more sense to me. Cool. Okay, go ahead, Eugene.
Okay, it's continue. I'll continue with the issue that was brought by Regina, that we were having those head lock errors when log files appearing out of nowhere in and repo controller, repo server failing its operations on that. We had some progress. We have found out that a new Git version that we have in release candidate for 3.2. It has upgraded Linux to Ubuntu Plucky Puffin, and it had a new Git version 2.48, and it has new functionality with background maintenance run. Essentially, it runs after some operations like git fetch. It runs maintenance with detach options, and this makes it escape the locking mechanism of Argo CD. And on some of our system, we got those errors. We had some internal fix that put Git configuration to disable this functionality. So it won't run it in the detached mode. It will run it foreground. So it fixed the issue for on our system, and I propose to do to put this fix into upstream Argo CD.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Eugene, for all the amazing work during this investigation.
We've discussed it on Slack privately, but I think it's great to present it to a wider audience here. It's interesting thing. It's I'm not finished with discovery because according to the Git documentation, this background running of background garbage collection was in Git in previous versions as well, but it didn't produce those errors. It's essentially it's timing race issue. It's probably because maintenance run takes more time than GC garbage collection background in the previous versions. But potentially this bug exists in older Git version with older Git versions as well. So I propose to do this fix and probably to backport to cherry pick it into previous supported versions.
Correct. And from the discussion, I don't see it listed here, but you suggested three. you're proposing three different
Yeah, pretty.
strategies to address the problem?
Here I propose to do to change Git system config, but after some thinking, I thought it's not a good idea, not so good idea, because people can have already customized for some reasons, like running custom filters for decryption, or probably configuring proxy for Git. So we don't want to mess with it. I want to make a more fix that doesn't depend on some global configuration like mounting config files. So I propose working on pull request. I propose to use Git ability of Git to change its configuration using environment variables. Essentially, in Go code that runs Git in Git in utils Git, we'll put into environment correct configuration to disable background detached processing. So it will fix for everyone, not depending what they do with their Git configuration, if they put additional Git variables into deployment, if they mount config files, it will disable background processing for any Git that we use.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, your proposal is to expose a new environment variable in Argo CD that allows Argo CD admins to enable or disable this Git
Yes,
feature.
yes. If somebody want to experiment with background processing anyway, don't want us to interfere with Git configuration, they'll have a variable to disable this thing that I'll call built-in Git configuration.
Right. Okay. And given recent, directions that, well, Michael is providing a few times before introducing new configurations in Argo CD, is mainly asking if there's any requirement to ever have this feature enabled in Git when it comes to the Argo CD overall functionality. Because if that's the case, maybe we can avoid adding and exposing this additional configuration and always disable the feature if that specific functionality has absolutely zero impact in Argo CD functionalities.
We can think about performance, influence on performance, because we put something that was running in background into foreground. I believe it will be negligible. I will do some discovery about its this influence. But if someone wants to experiment with this, he would have to have a way to enable background processing. So it's something that probably we want to document this variable in the user documentation, but internally it's a good thing to have. So the
I
ability to
doubt. I mean, Evgeny, I think I doubt that it would actually have a negative performance impact because essentially before this version of Git, it wasn't backgrounding it in the same way. So it should be essentially the same performance we've had before, right?
according to Git documentation, it has background processing. It simply we didn't catch this probably for some reason. So now we're putting it in the foreground as probably there will be some influence on performance. But
So you're saying before it was also in the background?
according to Git documentation, it was in the background. It was running in the background another way. Formerly, Git was auto maintenance run into foreground, and that would run garbage collection, and garbage collection itself would do fork and demonize itself. Now they changed that mechanism, and now it's always running some comment in the background. In the background, yes. Some changes they have done. It's probably it's made the problem more detectable, more apparent.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where I marked it for 3-2 because this is where we will expect to start having people run into this issue and having it hit randomly. So I think
Essentially, we have some client, rather big client. I can disclose what the client, but they seem to have this issue. Earlier morning, I got a message they having some this same message, probably the same thing.
yeah.
So it's possible.
So I think it's important that we get it into 3-2 and
I am going to make a pull request probably even today, later today.
but I do agree, I think, with Leo and that it's probably not required that we expose it. I think we can just set it as the default value. And we don't need to add like an option to overwrite it. If it causes issues, then we'll probably just change the default behavior again anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, we can start. We can have. Sorry, we can continue this discussion during the PR. I think that's kind of a implementation. It's not a big deal to expose it or not expose a specific variable in the code base. I mean, it's not a big implementation change. So, but I don't think there's any objection in moving forward with this approach, Eugene.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Cool. Thanks again. And moving forward, we have another topic from Patroklos about diffs. Is Patroklos in the call?
So
Oh,
this
yes, he
one
is.
was, yeah. So this one was actually an issue that was reported last week when I was in triage, and I thought that it would be nice to discuss it as a proposed feature because already it has a couple of, I can see 3 thumbs up. So yeah, what the user who opened that proposes actually is to add a new, let's say, diff type, but we do a diff from a specific revision. I don't have the full picture of why this should be valuable or not, so I thought that it will raise it here and get some feedback so I can just write back. Um, you know, if we decide that it's
Sure.
viable, we can, label it and prioritize it.
Okay, I read the proposal. It looks interesting. So basically, what the user is asking is the possibility to diff not only on the target revision configured on the application, but also on the history, right? So they can ask Argo CD to calculate the diff on previous versions because they want to validate something on those previous versions for some reason. I think it's an interesting feature to have. It's just that the proposal is very, very short. I think it would be great if we had some mock-ups and some suggestions on how the user experience would be. I added a comment here, so maybe having something in the history panel, the same panel where we have the rollback and history. There we already have a list of Git hashes that Argo City synced with. So maybe this is one. This could be one of the entry points to ask Argo CD to calculate the diffs based on that revision. But again, I think it's a good one and it's an interesting one, depending on the use case. Yeah. So do you want to continue with the user on that, Patroklos?
Yeah,
or-
I'll follow up. I'll follow up with the user and get some more, maybe
Right.
like I said, mockups or concrete functionality. And yeah, let's follow up.
It would be great if the person joined the contrib meeting and present their use case so we understand exactly why this
I
is.
will ask him maybe to do that
Okay.
in a future meeting if he's willing to do that.
All right. Cool. Thank you. Any questions on this proposal? And I guess it's good to ask if anybody has a strong opinion about this and it's and think we shouldn't go that direction for some reason. Okay, don't hear anything, but we can continue this discussion in the coming meetings. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, moving on, we have a few topics from Nitish. Nitish, you want me to click the link?
Yep, thanks, Leah. This is going to be, I think, more of a like I just need some advice on it. So I was going through the code base, and I realized a lot of part of our code base is using the endpoints API. And in Kubernetes version 1.33, the endpoints API has been deprecated. I even provided a link to the blog by Kubernetes in the point number 4. And I have linked just one piece of code that is basically using a deprecated APIs, and I think we should be updating that. But depending upon how much this API endpoint is getting used by a project, I'm not sure if like how should we go ahead and try to remove the deprecated API, because it might be getting used a lot of times at a project, and this may sometimes even lead to a breaking change, which I'm afraid of. So just want to get a heads up and understand what should be the best way trying to update the part of a code that is eventually using a deprecated APIs.
Okay, let me ask you this question then. Have you had any have you run any investigation in the code base to answer some of those questions you're asking in terms of where it's used and what kind of functionality is would be impacted by this change?
I haven't dig deeper into, but I realize like a lot of part of it in the GitOps engine is using that. For example, the one that I linked already, I think it is using like the complete file is eventually using that. And I even tried to use the like the latest API. This is going to, I think, how should I say? Like I think this is going to make this may lead to some breaking changes, which I'm afraid of. Uh, so yeah, I think GitOps engine is probably the first place that I have found this deprecated API is being used, but I still need to take a look at where in general Argo CD's code base it's getting used.
Okay, I don't know about this deprecation. I'm not following this closely, but just reading the title here, it seems that they're still going to be providing a method for us to call. It's just that it's going to be changing. I don't know. Instead of returning endpoints, it
So
will be
for example, like
returning.
in the example that I mentioned about endpoint address, that has been deprecated. So I think we're going to probably have to use endpoint slices so that the complete
Right.
code is going to look different from what it has been written right now.
Sure. Yeah, we need to understand if this is just a method name change, if there's a change in the contract other than the method name that we call. I think there's a further investigation required here, Nitish.
Okay.
And I think the main question we'll need to answer, Nitish, is do we invoke these endpoint APIs or use these endpoint APIs because we're like monitoring users' resources and we're just using those APIs on their behalf? Or do we like have code that proactively reaches out to these APIs independently of the user's decisions, in which case we probably just need to update our behavior?
I think the third is probably going to be the case, but I'll have to dig deeper into it and I'll get back to this then.
Cool.
I'm not sure about that, guy.
A good catch. Thanks for finding it.
Yeah, good one. I think it's important to keep on track on that. Cool. Any more questions on this topic, anyone? All right, moving on. The next
Sorry,
topic is
sorry, I was a bit too slow. Just but maybe one quick addition, at least just one data point that in our use case in our company we just like exclude endpoint and endpoint sizes from Argo CD, so like no like at least user dependent stuff. I think, and we just don't use them in UI, and like we kind of just optimize it for performance. So I think it like if there is any deprecation in Argo CD side, it should be fine. But yeah, just one data point.
okay. If you have additional info on this, can you please add in the ticket, and we can use this information as we are moving on with investigation.
Okay, try to find
Okay.
the ticket.
Cool. Thank you. And all right, moving on. Next topic is from Kanika. I think you are in the call. Yes.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
let
so
me click.
yeah, thanks. So I've opened this issue proposing that we move progressive sync to beta. I've tried to include all the relevant details and context in there. I really appreciate your thoughts and feedback whenever you get a chance. If there's any additional information needed, I'll be happy to add it. I've been actively working on progressive sync behind all of this. So there's like, I know that there's a syncing out of order issue, which is being worked on. And I did link that here. And Alex G had some suggestions over there. So I have made some progress in testing that out as well. So I'll update the linked issues accordingly. But yeah, so just like wanted to get this conversation rolling. And that I am actively working on progressive sync. So I don't know if that adds anything to it.
Cool. Thank you, Kanika. I think you had a document you presented, Reggie, a while back on the status for specific features. I'm not sure if it was for 3.2. But I know there's a document somewhere where we keep track on the status of the features we have. I think it would be good to update that doc. And I'm also adding a link here for you to get familiarized with
Yeah.
with how we expect to have the documentation itself updated. But yeah, we've been using this feature internally at Intuit as well, and it's serving us well.
I
Cool.
just
Sorry, go ahead, Reggie.
no, I just want to add that there was not a dedicated document for this. It was basically I just went through the documentation, looked at the issues that were too long alpha or too long beta, and then raised an issue for each of them of potential promotion and gathering feedback whether this was the case or not.
Okay, in that document wasn't the intention with that wasn't to have something permanently being updated. You did that just for a specific situation, is that correct?
Yeah, it's true because I mean we have this table in the docs of all the features and their status. So the documentation is basically the
Right.
place
The source of truth, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, Kanika. Any objections on making this and promoting this to beta? So it's alpha now. So the idea is the proposal is to promote this to beta. Okay, no objections in the call. We have myself and Nitish voting positively to this one. I don't think there's any blocker here, Kanika.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. And the next one is Johan.
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
First time joining, so got the beer. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a PR that I created and I'm trying to push forward a bit. It is related to Azure authentication, specifically using workload identity. So as you might know, there are multiple clouds in Azure for different rules and regulations. So there's the public one, there's the Azure government, and there's also the Azure China. So we need to also run Argo in a government use case. So we realized that workload identity didn't work in that use case. So I added the authentication for different clouds. So specifically, for example, like adding a OCI Helm chart repo using workload identity, and that, for example, that container registry lives in an Azure cloud environment, or Azure government environment. I added a few screenshots in the PR at the end there if you want to look of the resulting UI. So basically, when you add a repo and you check use Azure workload entity, it has a drop down to select the cloud you want to use. And obviously by default, Azure public, but now there's Azure government and Azure China. And yeah, so basically when you select one of those, the authentication background code takes it into account and authenticates to the right cloud.
Okay. And yeah, I'm not familiar with Azure. We don't use Azure in our company. So basically, we have the public Azure, and as you're explaining, there are the government-based ones that are separate. And when you say government, is any government or is the US government?
It's
Which
a US
government?
Gov. Yeah, US Gov.
Yeah, it's like a
So
separate
basically,
cloud.
with this, we're adding specific government configuration.
It's separate clouds completely with different domains for authentication, and you consider it a completely different cloud, just provided by Azure.
Okay.
And it's just this toggle for, I mean, that's the only thing that's been added, right? So I mean, that seems reasonable if we have this feature to be able to select between Azure Public and government and China.
Well,
Well, it
that's
looks
just
like
the UI facing part.
yeah,
There's
there's
a few
quite a bit
changes.
going on in the back end here.
Yeah.
A big change to workload identity in general. And I wanted to ask you actually, like, because it seems like without the UI part is kind of a bonus or whatever, but without this, it sounds like you weren't able to actually configure connection to these different cloud providers today.
That's right. Yeah, the issuer URLs and all that kind of stuff for IDC is completely different. So yeah, it wasn't supported at all.
And it seems like this is actually specific to the way that Azure works because of how they engage with workload identity. So it doesn't look like any of this is necessarily reusable for like AWS or another cloud provider.
No, sadly. Yeah, it's specific to Azure.
Wow.
And do we hard code any like URLs or configurations for like Azure or OCI in like Argo CD?
No. Basically, like each cloud is I use the Azure SDK to determine like what endpoints to use and everything, and the authentication is. So there's no hard coding done. It's basically done through the SDK. So if anything changes on their end, it should still work. Yeah.
AWS kind of has an equivalent government cloud service. I think it's called FedRAMP, but it is kind of like a common cloud provider pattern, I think. But each cloud's probably going to need their own kind of separate support for that.
Yeah.
Which makes me think if we should support this internally in the Argo City code base, or if we should make it possible to configure this type of government-based cloud providers outside of the code base. So if tomorrow later a new provider comes in, then users will be able to take advantage of that, because basically this is a configuration for one specific use case only. no one else will be able to leverage that in the community. So as Argo CD is a open source and public project, honestly, I would prefer to have this type of configuration outside of the code base and have a mechanism in Argo CD code base to allow that to be configurable by end users.
This problem reminds me of like ingress annotations for all the different ingress providers, and how it's a bunch of weird custom stuff on one API. And of course, all that went to Gateway API and it got abstracted away. If there were some generic SDK to handle workload auth for all the different providers, and we could use a standardized config for that, that would be amazing. But I don't think that, considering it doesn't seem to exist yet, it doesn't seem like we should be the ones necessarily to build that generic config. And I think for now, it might make sense to just let ourselves be stuck with kind of hard coding stuff until that standard emerges.
Yeah, I wasn't really talking about standards. I was talking about a mechanism to allow this type of configuration to be provided externally and not inside our code base.
Sure. I guess I'm wondering what does that mechanism look like? Do we define some plugin interface, and then who maintains
something like that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just to be clear though, like it's not well, obviously I'm maybe the first one that has this use case that took the time to contribute this, but anyone hosting Argo CD in Azure US Gov or Azure China would have this problem if they're using workload identity. So yeah, it is pretty niche, but it's not specific like to our use case, and like it's not something custom for us, right? It's something that still could possibly be used by the community. It's just I'm saying it's more of a fringe use case, but yeah, we have it. So
I wonder, so is it specific to workload identity, and can we like separate this into like generic code for handling workload identity mechanism? But I haven't looked at the PR, so maybe that's what you're doing already. But I just want to clarify, if you can do maybe just workload identity SDK inside Argo CD, that's probably like in my opinion good. But it doesn't have to be ideally specific to maybe Gov Cloud. So maybe that part can be part of config. So for example, in a case of our company, we use AWS and we also have Gov Cloud. And to the best of my knowledge, we just have different, but we use Okta. We have just different Okta configs for Gov and non-Gov, slightly different endpoints, but that's just a part of DEX. But of course there is some part which is enables this DEX config to work. So if it's not exist right now for workload identities, then I think adding it is reasonable. But yeah, maybe I would err on the side, maybe not adding specifically Azure Government, Azure China, or Azure Public in Argo CD natively, but maybe leave that as a part of config, something like that.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be part of some config somewhere, regardless whether that config is part of some standardized externalized resource that's communicated to Argo CD via some plugin, or whether it's built directly into Argo CD. It's a parameter of the workload identity SDK, and it has to somehow make its way into Argo CD. So I, in general, agree with Leo's intuition that at some point it becomes a nightmare to maintain every single parameter for every single cloud provider, and that should ideally be externalized. But if we did that externalization today, it would be us writing the plugin interface and us writing that external thing that then communicates the config in. So we're doing the work either way, and now we add on a layer of plugin interface. Until there's some community effort to standardize this configuration, I don't think it really makes sense for us to blaze that trail. I think we're sort of just stuck embedding all these different cloud provider configs in Argo CD. And so far,
I agree.
it's been a nightmare.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of blame Azure here looking at this because I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, hey, we already have the Azure SDK in here to do the workload identity, but they require a different configuration for the different areas of their cloud. Like, I'm kind of irritated that they like Azure should have made their SDK work better. They should have just been like, hey, where's the universal interface? And you pass in your option and you call it a day. But they didn't, and we should call them out. We at KubeCon we need to go track down their team and yell at them or something. But what I'm looking at in the implementation here, and like Johan, like this is it's actually quite a bit of work. So thank you for bringing this because
My pleasure.
I do want to support these things, and I know that there are other users that will want this. And from what I can tell, I don't see a way that you can support workload identity in these other clouds without the work that you've added. Is there, am I missing something? Is there some other way that with the generic workload identity configuration we can pass in a variable or something? Because I don't see that as an option.
I'm not too familiar with AWS or GCP's implementations of workload identity, so I guess they probably have something similar. But yes, I kind of hard coded this list because the checkbox that enables this list is specifically like use Azure workload identity. So I was like, okay, so this makes sense because it's specific to Azure. But yeah, if we would want to generalize it to multiple clouds, then yeah, kind of like Michael said, if there's not some other SDK or some other community effort to, generalize this, and then it doesn't really make sense for Argo to be the one to implement it. But I think in the case where right now it's, it was already specific to Azure, this workload identity implementation, then in that case, adding like which cloud you would want it for, I saw it as something, that made sense. But I get what you're all saying. Like it sucks that every cloud has their own type of their own way of going about this. But
What I'm hearing is thanks for the contribution. I think we're probably going to have to merge it. None of us are happy about it that Azure is going to make us do it that way.
Yeah, well,
I think like based on what Dan's saying, seems like there is some special code and like maybe if statements required for like to construct the stuff we need for different clouds, and there is no generic config interface you could use. Yeah, in that case, I think there is just no better way than what you did for at least for now.
The other problem with having this internally in Argo City code base is that we have zero possibility to test it, right? So it's basically a code that is not testable. So how can we validate that this actually works in these government clouds? So yeah, I still think we should spend some time externalizing this instead of bringing that in the code base. Not sure.
The UI screenshots, I'm sorry, the UI screenshots I posted are from a government cloud. So I didn't, actually test it manually. I didn't test it in China because we don't have a China cloud instance, but yeah, I made sure it works before, because like you said, it's kind of difficult to test. The whole test setup was a pain in the butt, but yeah, it works. And there are unit tests, but that can only go so far.
Sorry, I believe that there is also a German cloud. Probably it will be easier to test there than in China or US government.
I'm not aware of that. Maybe.
Yeah. So maybe what we could do is try to drum up some volunteers to do some testing in their scenarios and review it as well. Because I think like what Leo's pointing out is that a lot of us will look at the code and say, okay, like I see you're not doing anything crazy here. Like it looks, reasonably constructed. I see how you've moved stuff into the workload identity utility and try to generalize it as much as possible. But it would be nice if we had like a couple of users that could say, "Oh yeah, this works for us." And we may not see that until we just put it in the code anyway. we may not see those people show up. They'll show up and let us know that it doesn't work.
Yeah,
There was
we have the exact same problem for SCMs and application set. We've got all these different APIs that we've got to integrate with, and no one has access to test them all. But there's no common industry standard abstraction for that. So we're on the hook for testing it either way. If we build the abstraction, we still have to test the abstraction.
Do we need a class of feature, Michael, that's like it's not necessarily that it's beta, it's more like you're like we don't like we think there's like there's not a lot of we don't know who the users are that are using this and we can't really use it and it's like a kind of a use at your own risk thing.
feature flag, basically.
Yeah, I don't know.
So is it like alpha essentially?
Experimental?
I think alpha,
Environment specific, user environment specific.
Like
but
community maintained.
alpha
You
works in
take
the
your own
same
risk.
way, right?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Sheeta, go ahead. You're kind of quiet.
No, I'm saying like alpha works in the same way, right? Like if it doesn't work, you just remove it. Yeah, it's not a thing. It's tested in the production. Technically, alpha is those features that where community is still deciding on if we want this feature or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the idea of some designation, particularly for like SCM integrations or, PR generator for apps or whatever, that we say, hey, this is community contributed, community maintained. We can't guarantee that it's going to work. If there's like a breaking change in the API or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It maybe it's just enough to just mark it as alpha. And so people know it's somewhat experimental and if we have a bunch of users come to us who are like, oh yeah, like we're using this all the time and hey, we can help review it and then like okay, maybe we can start moving it up to a more stable thing. But yeah, I think it's reasonable to kind of just mark it as alpha and take it from there. We do a similar thing with health checks, right? We have all of these really big value inside of Argo CD that we have all these custom resource health checks available for people. And a lot of the times when we're reviewing them, it's like, I assume that this works well for you because you're the one that developed it. And I know it's not doing anything nefarious. That's kind of as good as it's going to get. And it ends up being a big value, right? To the project. And this is another case where I think you probably mark it as alpha. And I would actually mark it in the UI as well, Johan. I think I would put like alpha just on the labels. And then in the documentation, just mention that it's alpha and we can make a mention there that like, oh, if you're a user that's using this, we're looking for people who can help do testing and validation on this. Because what we're really looking for is just more people to raise their hands and say, yeah, this works well for us. This is stable, but we're not going to get them until we put the feature in the first place. And those people don't have an option to use Argo CD today with the current configuration. So yeah, I think that's my feedback, Johan, is let's just label it appropriately. And we'll do some, hopefully from the group, we can get a couple of code reviews because it is kind of a hairy, like it's not crazy. It's just moving stuff into the workload identity queue. And I don't expect it's going to cause issues from what I've looked at briefly with any other workload identity users. So yeah, thumbs up for me.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Johan, for your contribution. Dan, I think we're gonna have to move and push your talk for next week. We're on time now.
Okay.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining and see you all next week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.